Welcome to the Science of Learning. This is what we're going to be talking about today, and I am delighted to have with me Greg Goward, who is the principal of Uri Middle School in Walkerton, Indiana, and Trish Whitcomb, who is somewhere in the state of Indiana. She moves around so fast, it's hard to keep track of her. Just delighted that she's here as well. So just a couple of housekeeping things as we get started. We are recording the webinar today, and we'll be sending out a link to the recording. So if you have colleagues who weren't able to join in today, they will have a chance to check it out. I think we have the chat window working today. So if you have questions, please type them into the chat, or you can type them in the Q&A. Both should be available today. And if you requested a certificate for professional development credit, then you will get that automatically, probably fairly early next week. So that will come out if you requested that. This QR code and the link that I have at the bottom of the slide, and I also posted the link in the chat. I may need to repost it because sometimes when people join after the initial post, okay, so that's another way that you can download the slides, is just to click on the link in the chat. So I think we are ready to get going. Here's what we're going to be about today. We're going to talk about the science of learning and really look underneath or inside, pretend we can actually see inside our students' heads, which we can't always actually do, but we can learn a lot about how they learn. Greg is going to share with us his very exciting results and implementation of the principles that we're talking about today in terms of cognitive assessment and cognitive training. And at the end, we will get a chance to delve into, there's at least one member, I hope she is here today. I'm not going to mention who she is, but we have one of our party today who took the Mindprint assessment, and I'm going to share that with you and talk about, use that as an example really to try to bring home how we can learn about how students learn. So we do an awful lot of talking about teaching and learning in our world, and we don't always think about what those things are, what we really mean by them, what makes for good teaching, what makes for good learning. So I wanted just to delve into that for a little bit. We take them for granted. I want to ungrant them, or take them for ungranted, or however that would work. And I looked up and I found a few different definitions of teaching. And I want you to take a look at these. And I think that one of them is different from the others in terms of how it talks about teaching. And I'd love for anybody who has the same observation to type into the chat window what you think it is and how you think it's different. So Trish, I know you're going to help me monitor the chat.
You got a 1 in 3 chance.
All right. Not okay. Well, so maybe we think they're all the same, or maybe we just haven't had a chance to think through that. But I think that the Merriam-Webster, the last one here, is a little different. And the reason I think it's different is that it really talks about something changing for the person who's on the other end of the teaching. A lot of times teaching is about what we're giving, what we're transmitting, what we're sharing, what we're divulging, what we're doing, all those things. But it's important to remember that sometimes there's a lot of teaching that can go on, and it's been going on for hundreds of years. We've been teaching reading and math and all kinds of other things. And when there's teaching going on, there isn't always learning going on. So then, of course, we want to turn it around and we want to say, what is learning? And I would love it if some of you would also then type into the chat window how you would define learning. What is learning? hope the chat is actually working.
If you've tried to chat, but you don't see anything, try the Q&A option, just so we can hear from you. Oh, here's a new message.
Oh, gaining knowledge in a way that you can use it later. Fantastic. Thank you, Sarah. You're my hero. I always try to volunteer when I'm in trainings and things like that, because I know how important it is to have our everybody thinking about it, engaging in it. And so acquiring knowledge and experience, great. Thank you, Angela. Very good. And all of those are true. They're very typical of what I hear when I ask this question. But we want to think about it in a slightly different way today, which is learning is actually a biological process. And so, we think about acquiring knowledge because we can measure more or less whether knowledge has been acquired. We talk about gaining skills or gaining the ability to do something because we can sort of test that. We can't look inside brains to see the biological process, but it's important to understand because it's going to tell us a lot about what effective teaching is going to be and the kind that will result in effective learning. And learning is actually the act of making and strengthening connections among thousands of neurons into neural networks or maps in our brain. And so it's we're going to talk about the neurons a little bit more in a second, but when we are taking in information, it's activating neurons in our brain. And those are the neurons that are connecting and strengthening those connections among them. And that's where learning happens, in those connections between the neurons. So when we remember something, we don't just go pull it out of storage or a file drawer or the vault or whatever it is. What we're doing then is we're actually reactivating that neural network. And so if we've made strong connections, it's going to be fairly easy to reactivate that network. And if we haven't, then it's going to be more difficult. And so we're going to start to think about what it is that we can do that is going to create those really strong neural networks. And the neuroscientists have a phrase that they use, which is neurons that fire together, wire together. Now, they don't literally wire together, but what it means is that every time you activate a neural network, you are strengthening the connections, and it's more likely that you're going to be able to reactivate it, that is, to retrieve it or to remember it later. So it's a really important concept. This is actually a picture of 3 neurons, or a diagram, not a picture. And you can see each of them with a nucleus in the cell body. Each one has one axon, which is the part of the neuron that carries the message to other neurons. And that it's an electrical message that flows down the axon until it gets to that connection with the next neurons that it's trying to communicate with. And that's where neurotransmitters come in. And it dumps a whole bunch of neurotransmitters into the little tiny space between the axon and the dendrite. The dendrite is the part of the neuron that is taking in that information. And in that connection, which is called a synapse, that little gap is actually where the neurotransmitters communicate. And that's how that communication happens. So each neuron has about 6,000 dendrites, just one axon. Dendrites comes from the Greek word for tree. So it's like the branches of a tree, and the cell body is just covered with dendrites. So that makes all of these tons and tons and tons of trillions of connections. And all of this communication, the sending of electrical signals to activate or to tamp down the activation of other neurons in the neural network, is the basis of all human behavior. This is communication among all of these neurons in our brains. And we have about 85 billion of them. Sometimes in the literature, you'll see higher numbers. Those are older. The current estimate is about 85 billion, but 85 billion means that you can have trillions and trillions and trillions of connections among those neurons. And in fact, this is what it looks like. When we this is a slide of neurons actually in our brain. Of course, this is magnified. You could fit 30,000 neurons on the head of a pin. So they're tiny, and you wouldn't be able to see them with the naked eye, but we can, through, of course, technology, be able to do that. And you can see those little dots all over the place. And you can see that they form themselves sort of into rows. That's because these are the layers of the cortex. The cortex is the outer covering of our brain, right under our skull. It's where all of our thinking and all of this information processing happens that we're talking about. And so you can see just these zillions and zillions of connections among these neurons. Now, we didn't start off this way. We started off when we were born with 85 billion or so neurons. We don't, the number of neurons doesn't actually change a lot over our lifetimes. But what does change is the connections. And so you can see this picture on the left. You can see the neurons, not very many connections, but they're reaching out, trying to find other neurons to connect to that are going to help us make sense of the world. And then you can see what's happened by the age of 2. So this production of synapses, this production of connections among the neurons happens just amazingly rapidly between the time that it starts happening in utero until age 2. It's 1.8 synapses per second. So it's just boom, boom, boom. They're happening all the time. And so what you're seeing in this picture of the 2-year-old neurons is that there's just a lot of connections. And in fact, there are too many connections. And this is what the terrible twos looks like. So we've all, if you have kids who've gone through that stage, you remember what it's like. It's a lot of chaotic behavior, a lot of conflicting things. And it's because they have too many connections and they finding the right ones and the ones that are the most effective. So our brains will actually prune away some of these connections and work on strengthening the ones that are the most useful. There's actually another time in our lives when this overproduction of connections of synapses happens. And if anybody can guess what it is, I'd love you to type that in the chat window too. I'm not seeing anybody.
We fall in love.
We fall in love? Oh, maybe. Well, it might be because we often do that at this time of our lives, but it's in adolescence that teenagers are go through this overproduction, and it actually makes those teenage years. And this is, Greg's great fortune, but also it creates some trials along the way because you're going to see some 2-year-old kind of behavior in those middle school years. But it's also an amazing opportunity for learning because the brain it's called plasticity, creating all of these connections. So why is this important? It's important because we do not, as teachers, as educators, as parents, transmit information to our students. Every student's brain has to build its own understanding and skills and create and strengthen its own neural networks. We create experiences, the environment, brains don't develop other than in interaction with the environment. Well, that's not entirely true. There's some wired in connections, but certainly at the level of the cortex, it's all being developed and connected in interaction with the environment. So we are adapting, we're learning, we're creating those experiences and memories that will let us function in everyday life. And every learning experience physically changes the brain, changes the connections, it strengthens them or weakens them, connects networks with other networks. And I'm really conscious of this when I am thinking about going to prepare to teach a class or to conduct a training, is that my students' brains, in fact, my brain and everybody else who's in this, is going to be physically different in some way. It's a pretty awesome responsibility, but it's pretty exciting too, to know that that capacity is there, that we are learning machines, and that's what our brains were designed to do. So we need to take advantage of that incredible power. So we've been talking about teaching and learning, but what I want to emphasize is the learning part of this. And so what I want to do is click on this thing. There we go. And remind us, and we always talk about this as learning and teaching. And we know that while teaching may happen before learning, learning without teaching also happens. And so we want to always be thinking about the learning part of this before we teach about the teaching part of it. So now one of the things hopefully we've talked about and learned is that when neurons fire together, they wire together, which means that whatever connections you have just made in your brain, we can make them stronger by giving you an opportunity to reactivate them. So what I'd like you to do is jot down on a piece of paper or in the chat window. I'd love to get some conversation going along in the chat window. You guys have a lot of different experiences, and I know that your colleagues will find it valuable if you can. So I want you to pretend that your friend or your colleague has just joined this session, and they sat down, they whispered to you, "So what's been going on? What did I miss?" So your job is to tell them the most important thing that they missed. Well, I'd love for everybody to be typing madly into the chat window. The most important part of what you're doing right now, so I hope you're doing it, is writing something down for yourself, thinking about it, because that's what is reactivating those connections and what will help strengthen them and make them easier to remember later, like this afternoon when somebody says, "So what did I miss?" And something also very helpful to keep in mind when you're in your classrooms is to always make sure that you give students time to process, time to, we don't transmit knowledge, we create opportunities for their brains to build connections and learn. Sarah, fantastic. That's a very important thing. Okay. So what we want to do now is talk about, since we're going to focus on learning, we're going to talk about how learning happens, not from a biological point of view, but from sort of a process point of view. So what is it that students are doing when they're learning? What do our brains, what skills and capabilities do our brains have to have in order to be good learners? And this is a chart that we use to talk about that. So up at the top are the reasons that Greg and Trish and all of you are in the business we're in, which is to help students achieve academically, get as far as they can and want to, get a good job that will support them and their family, be healthy and contributing members of society. Most of the time, I think we remember that we think that this is what we're doing. Every once in a while, we may think we're preparing them for a standardized test, but at the end of the day, that's just, incidental along the way. And what we really care about, of course, is that we are educating them for life. And what we do in school is we focus on things like reading and writing and math and science, sometimes sports, sometimes social and emotional learning, and we call it different things depending on where we are and sometimes what the politics are like where we are. But it could be self-management, it could be whole child, it could be a lot of different things, but recognizing that the ability to organize ourselves and to manage our own selves and our learning is an important part of learning as well. And what we don't always focus on is the bottom three steps on this chart, which are I call it the infrastructure for learning, or the foundation for learning. And that's what cognitive skills are. So that's what these 3 bottom steps are about. And it starts right down in the first step with what we call foundational cognitive skills. And these are skills like attention, visual processing, auditory processing, processing speed, sequential processing. So these are the basic ways that information gets into our brains from the outside world that starts the learning process. And if they're happening efficiently and accurately, that's great. We get a good start. But we know also that if they're not, and in many cases, they're not working as well as they need to be, that we're going to have some stumbling blocks. There are going to be some gaps. We're not going to be taking in everything that we need to. Attention is one of those skills that we're very aware of because we can often see it or the lack thereof in our classrooms. And I know if I ask this group, if anybody has ever had a class full of students, all of whom had good attention skills, to raise their hand, I would be very unlikely to have anybody raise their hand because we know that these skills are strong in some students and weak in others. We all have cognitive strengths and weaknesses. And it starts down at this very basic level of these skills that happen at a non-conscious level in fractions of a second. But if they're not working well, then it's going to be really challenging. That second step up is a very special group of cognitive skills called executive functions. And I know you're hearing the term a lot these days for a very good reason. These are really critical skills in the learning process, not just in how well we behave and how well we can get along with others. Although that's typically how I find how teachers tend to think of them, as really sort of self-regulation, but there's a lot more to it than that. And we'll talk more about what these are and how important they are. But just quickly, working memory, there are 3 core executive functions. Working memory is how we hold information in our mind while we think about it. It's what we can put in our conscious processing. Inhibitory control, pretty much what it sounds like. And it's probably the closest to that concept of self-regulation. So it's the ability of my brain to stop myself from doing something I otherwise would do, like I don't punch somebody in the nose when I get mad at them. And then cognitive flexibility is the ability to shift gears and regroup and think of things from a different perspective, step back, find a different way to solve a problem if I'm having difficulty solving it, look at things from different perspectives and that kind of thing. And then there are some higher order executive functions, which read pretty much like 21st century skills. And these are also, we put more emphasis on these today than we probably ever have in the past. Our thinking and problem solving and all kinds of things. And we know how important those are. And we show this in this chart, all sitting underneath as the foundation for reading and math and the things that we do in school. Not just nice to have along the side, but something that is absolutely essential and the foundation. So if we think now about reading, there's a lot of discussion these days about the science of reading. Trish sent me an email a couple of days ago about the New York City schools. The chancellor there has declared that all schools, as of I think next year, must choose one of 3 curricula that are based on the science of reading as it's being discussed, which means really, in some ways, not a lot different from the approaches to reading or the skills that we've always known to be important for reading, but a much stronger emphasis on phonics and phonemic awareness when it comes to decoding. So that it's changing. And I read a couple of other states that are considering legislative mandates on that front. So I don't think we ever really think that the legislative approach is the best, but it certainly hopefully is getting some attention because there is tremendous science But as good as that is, and as important as that is, decoding, fluency, vocabulary, and comprehension are critical skills for reading. We can't be good readers without them. But in fact, they're not sufficient. We can get good at all of those skills and still not be successful and good readers. We can still get stuck. And the reason is that there are these underlying cognitive processes which need to be working. So for example, if I can't sustain my attention while I'm decoding a word, if my attention wanders off halfway through, and I know we've probably all seen this happen, where you have to, gets distracted, has to go back and start again. Obviously, that's going to impair decoding. Things like processing speed and visual span are going to have an impact on fluency. Vocabulary, another set of these cognitive skills. And comprehension, of course, where the rubber really meets the road, and where we struggle a lot as educators. I hear this over and over again from teachers and from principals like Greg, how difficult it is sometimes to get kids to make that leap from being able to read something out loud to being able to read that out loud and then actually discuss it and remember what it said, be able to tell you about it, have a conversation about it. And if you think about comprehension, if you think about what's happening when you're reading, you're taking in pieces of information, you're holding them in your mind while you're thinking about them, you're comparing them to what you already know. Your brain is doing that because that is what comprehension, that's what creates meaning. That's how we understand things. And all of that happens in working memory. Working memory is our only conscious processing. So if our working memory is limited, which it is for everybody, but if it's more limited than typical, or if it's taken up with the decoding process, you're really going to see some struggles, and you're not going to find kids who are really doing a great job of comprehending and applying all those critical thinking skills. And then the same principles apply in math. And I don't know why it just occurred to me, maybe I'm having a little attention in the middle of decoding my word, but I want to make sure that everybody remembers to type questions in the chat window as well as we go along. If you have questions, I don't want you to lose them, and I know how easy that is to do. So back to math, which is where we use these same cognitive skills, sort of in little bit different ways, but think about counting. If I asked you to count the number of flowers in your garden or the number of people in a room that you just entered, what you're doing is you have to keep track of which ones you've counted, which ones you haven't counted, and where you are in the sequence of counting. That happens in working memory as well. And then, of course, when we get to more advanced math, we have a lot of different reasoning skills, but also many of these underlying cognitive, basic cognitive processes. And I always like to say, well, some of these, in fact, these skills are the same in a lot of respects. You probably have noticed that. And you said, oh, well, attention's here and attention's also in math and reading and all that. Of course it is, because we have one brain. We don't change brains when we go from reading class to math class to science class to the football field or the volleyball court. What we are doing is using our brain and the skills that we bring with it, no matter what we're doing. And it's actually kind of unusual for us to be having this conversation today. And I'd be interested in your thoughts about how unusual it is, or whether this is, topics that you hear about and talk about a lot, but it is unusual in general. At least the research data says that. Because the research data says that about 50% of the variability, the variance in academic outcomes can be predicted by our cognitive skills. So if you have two kids sitting next to each other and one gets A's and one gets D's, and they've had the same educational experiences, 50% of that difference is going to be accounted for by their cognitive ability. Not by class size, not by technology and curriculum, not by all the other things that we think about. So this is it's an underutilized resource. It's a the capability of our students to learn is something we can benefit by paying more attention to it. In fact, in schools today, it's about 5% of resources are spent on this. And I think it's starting to change the way that it has for social and emotional, but nonetheless, it's a largely underutilized source of improvement in education and learning. Students come to our classrooms with widely varying cognitive skills. We've known this and you've experienced this as teachers, so this is not a surprise. There are a lot of reasons that this is the case. Some are just simply developmental, some are background. The impact on poverty is becoming much more understood on cognitive development. ACEs and stress can be major factors as well in less well-developed cognitive skills. Learning disabilities, ADHD, you can go down the list. And the fact of the matter is we can't do much about any of these, but what we can do something about is actually helping develop cognitive skills regardless of where the weaknesses come from. So I want to do a couple of things now. One is that I want to dig in and give some examples. I'm real big on examples and hands-on as a learning tool, because I know that engagement and actually working through something is going to be more meaningful. And so we want to now think about what we might do if we had a couple of students that we're working with in our classroom. And this is results of a cognitive assessment that they have taken. It's called Mindprint. We're going to talk more about that. This is the cognitive assessment that Greg uses in his school to assess his students. And so he's seen a lot of profiles. In fact, these may be two of his. I cannot remember, to be honest. And what we have here is I've highlighted among all the skills, it's just focusing on verbal memory and visual memory. So I think we can kind of intuitively think about this as ourselves. So verbal memory is the ability to remember what we read and hear. So it's language-based information, and which you've been hearing a lot of today. You've also been taking in some visual information in the slides and the cameras and things like that. And so visual memory is the ability to retrieve, remember information that we've seen that's in a visual format. Images, pictures, charts, graphs, diagrams, all that kind of thing. And one of the things that we know is that for most of us, one of those skills is stronger than the other. So we tend to think someone has good memory or not good memory, but there are a lot of gradations in between, and there can be a lot of difference between types of memory. So here we're looking at verbal and visual. And what you're seeing is that the skills that were assessed in this cognitive assessment are divided into the group within that blue frame are the skills that were in the expected range. So typical for that child's age and their peer group. The green would be a strength. That's the top 16% of the population. And the purple is a weakness. So basically the bottom 16%. And actually this little dark box here means that it was the bottom 5%. So we have a student one who's got really strong verbal memory and very weak visual memory, even more extreme, but the other way around for student two. Very strong visual memory and very weak verbal memory. So now I want you to think about these two students that you have sitting in your classroom with different strengths of different kinds of memory. And I want you to consider this assignment that you might give them. This is an assignment that I know I've received. It's a very typical kind of assignment that a teacher might give to help students learn new vocabulary. Teacher might say, what I want you to do is I want you to write the word. I want you to write the definition of the word. And then I want you to write the word in a sentence. So my question is, which one of these students will benefit the most from and be the most successful in learning vocabulary this way. And again, I'd love it if somebody would type in the chat window. So, of course, the student on the left who's got really strong verbal memory is going to be very good at working with language-based information, writing those words, writing those sentences, words. That's great for this student because that's what they remember. But student 2 is probably going to be struggling because they have difficulty remembering language-based information. And that assignment is probably going to be really difficult for them. They're going to struggle with it. And at the end of doing it, they're less likely to actually remember it. And so we can learn a lot. This is just a simple example. And of course, this is sort of extremes, but it is the case that most students are going to be stronger in one or the other. And when we can help them understand what their strengths are, we can help them use strategies to be better at doing them. So I want to look now at that other group of cognitive skills that we talked about called executive functions, because this is, a big underlying issue for lots and lots of students. And I know Greg will have an opportunity to share with you what he's seen with his students in this regard. But I wanted, before we leave this topic of talking through cognitive skills and what they are and what the impact is, I want to make sure that one of the points that I want to make sure that you're all taking away with you is that these processes, these cognitive skills are the same mental process, whether it's in an academic context or whether it's in a behavioral context. So working memory, for example, is the same mental process, whether we are keeping track of where we are in a multi-step math problem, or whether we are, or comprehension, as we talked about a little bit earlier, or whether we're sitting and having a conversation and trying to hold multiple ideas in mind and keep track of people's different perspectives. Or keep track of a set of instructions that our teacher has just given us so that she doesn't think we weren't paying attention. But sometimes it's about holding it in our mind and not being able to do that. Inhibitory control is the same mental process, whether it's keeping ourselves from blurting out words when we're reading, or whether we keep ourselves from using our fists when we get angry, or, as I like to say, blowing out the candles on somebody else's birthday cake. And then cognitive flexibility is what happens when we need to adjust, when we need to think about things from a different perspective, when our first approach doesn't work. If you ever come across a child who just gives up at the first sign of difficulty, I can't do that. It's because very often they haven't been able to shift their thinking. They haven't been able to come up with an alternative, a different way to think about things. And of course, that impacts us as we're considering different perspectives in literature or in real life. So let me just give an example. Just got a couple more minutes on this, and then you're going to get to hear from Greg. And just want to give you an experience of how important working memory can be in reading, and remind us that it's our conscious processing, it's limited, and how often this can be, or understanding the role that it plays can be important in understanding why students struggle with reading sometimes. So this is a little activity that I've developed, and if we have somebody who studied Russian, this is going to be really easy for you. Otherwise, hopefully it will be a challenge. And I'm going to declare that we're replacing our standard, our old familiar alphabet with the Russian alphabet. And so there's some different symbols that we're going to need to recognize. An A looks like an A, but if you see this B, it's going to make the sound of a V. If you see this funky D, that is a D. E is a Y sound. This backwards N is an E, an I sound, like an I. K looks like a K. M looks sort of like an M, but this H is an N. So if we now take a particular word, so here's a word, this is not a Russian word, but this is an English word and transliterated into using by using the Russian alphabet. And so this first letter is, we can look over here and we can see it is this, and it makes the P sound. So this next letter is an E sound. So it makes eh, and then this little H makes an N sound. So this word is pen. It's not the Russian word for pen. All it is pen represented in different symbols with the Russian alphabet. So I want you to try on something a little more challenging, and I would like you to figure out how to read this. And then if anybody figures out it or any part of it, please type into the chat window what you think it says, or even just part of it. I always like to give people a little bit of time. Although if we were sitting in our reading circle, we certainly would have expected somebody to be able to read this, wouldn't we, Trish?
Yes.
Okay. Do we have any?
I'm not gonna put my answer in because I already know it. That would be cheating.
Yes. You had the test key, right?
That's right.
Okay. So I'm not seeing anybody yet. Hopefully everybody's still working on it. So if we read this, if we just phonetically read this, it says decoding puts heavy demands on working memory when not automatic. So if decoding isn't automatic, we got a lot of our working memory space that's being taken up by it. And hopefully, as you did this exercise, you felt how much of your working memory was taken up by the decoding process, simply figuring out how to pronounce the words, and probably did not until maybe you got all done and you'd rewritten it in our traditional alphabet, even been able to think about what it meant. And this is the kind of thing that our kids struggle with, and why comprehension can be so challenging. So just a few takeaways that I want to make sure, just want to emphasize before we give the floor over to Greg. What we've been talking about this morning are that cognitive skills are how we learn, not the what. We spent a lot of time in teaching and in school on the what and the standards and things like that, but this is how we learn. These are the same mental processes, whether it's reading, math, or anything else that we do. We all have cognitive strengths and weaknesses. So I do, Trish does, Greg does, and all of us do, and our students surely do. And we're all born with the capability to develop these cognitive skills, but not everyone has developed the same cognitive capacity. And the one thing that we haven't talked about yet, but that I really want to underscore, because this is what we're going to be talking about and what Greg is going to be sharing with us, is that cognitive skills can actually be developed through cognitive training to a far greater degree than most people recognize. So it's something we haven't thought about before. We think about teaching in different ways, but we can also utilize this incredible resource that we have, this asset that's in the plasticity of our students' brains to actually help them develop these cognitive skills. So just quickly before we get Greg started, just want to have a chance for anybody to ask any questions that they have at this point. So please type them into the chat window or into the Q&A. Either one would be great. I don't think I'm really that good, but I know that sometimes it takes a while for questions to emerge and for you to think of them. And I also know that processing and processing speed play a factor. And we may have some of you who just need a little bit more time to do that. So feel free to chat them. Feel free to chat them. Feel free to put them in the chat as they occur to you. And we can always come back to them. We're also going to provide our contact information afterwards. We're always happy to follow up and make sure if we haven't made something clear. So without further ado, want to introduce Greg Gowert. Greg is the principal of Ury Middle School in Walkerton, Indiana. He tells me he's been a professional educator for 30 years, which in my view means he must have started when he was about 2, but maybe he was very precocious. He's been named Principal of the Year twice in previous school districts. Based on the results he's seeing this year, this ought to be another year, but he's got a couple of boys of his own who learn differently. And did we lose Greg? She's still there. Oh no, he's looking like he's just joining again.
Yeah, I'm back.
And okay. All good? Greg has an EDS degree also from Indiana State University, and it's just been a wonderful group, he and his team, to work with. So it's want to give him a chance to tell you about his experience and how he has implemented cognitive assessment and cognitive training at his school.
I think I'm back as far as sound goes. Intermittently, we're having some issues with the Wi-Fi. Can you hear me fine?
I hear you well now, yes.
Good. So if you'll let me back in on the video, that's fine. If you want to keep me off camera, my wife will understand.
No, I'd love to figure out how to do this. Let me.
Okay. So I'm just going to start talking for a little bit about, John Glenn Schools and I guess who we are and why we're doing what we're doing. We're not a whole lot different than anybody else around the state. We're kind of rural, and parts of our people are kind of, suburb of South Bend. So we are like 25 minutes southwest of South Bend, Indiana. When I first looked at and heard of John Glenn, I had no idea where John Glenn schools were at. I kind of figured it was in Ohio, since John Glenn was an astronaut from there, and I grew up in Ohio. But we're up here in Walkerton, Indiana, just southwest of South Bend. Typical middle school problems. Starting through this school improvement process about 4 years ago. Needed to improve iLearn test scores. We wanted to have, more competitive sports teams. We wanted to have our kids be more confident in who they are, know their own data better, just be better students. be better connected, all those types of things. So, we did the normal stuff of trying to improve like school climate and culture. We continue to do teacher professional development right now, K-8. Our district has a goal to have every teacher STEM PBL certified by the end of next school year. And I would say we're just pretty much normal like everybody else, the same types of problems. We don't have enough subs. The Wi-Fi goes out once in a while. We're one-to-one Chromebooks. The people in this community grew up with the same type of a school structure that we still have to this day. Hadn't been a whole lot of things changed really in the last 50 years, but there is a push for accountability, and we want to be better, and we know that we need to get better looking at some of our data. So we decided that maybe the thing that we needed to do was try and provide professional development for our students, try to grow our students. And I guess the analogy I use when I talk about this is if I go into the gym every day and I do bicep curls for like a couple months, my biceps are going to get strong. I'm going to be good as far as biceps go. But the second that I stop doing those bicep curls, my biceps are going to go back to being the skinny little rubber bands that they are today. I'm going to lose it. It's not going to stay with me. And so I didn't want a product that, or a strategy that helped me in the short term. I wanted something to where kids would be better students and they would grow in academic, in their confidence, in a lot of different ways. So what's out there, how is it that we can help a student be a better student? What is learning? And we started with a conversation with now affectionately called Aunt Betsy about how the brain works and how the brain learns. I've always been intrigued by it. I've adopted a couple of boys that are fetal alcohol syndrome disorder type kids or labeled kids. I knew that they had some challenges as a result of their experiences early on, and I wanted to help them, and I wanted to help my own students. And so when I found out that 50%, cognitive skills can have up to a 50% impact on learning, to me, that was just a huge factor. Obviously, I wish I had a light switch or a magic pill that got middle school kids to suddenly care about learning, care about doing everything the best that they can, and just magically gave them the ability to get to class on time, stay out of trouble, make good decisions, manage their cell phone and their social media a lot better, all those normal things that we all struggle with. There's no magic pill, there's no light switch. In order to get better at something, you got to put in some effort and you got to put in some hard work, but you got to figure out what you're going to target and what you're going to work on. So we decided on an approach to try to grow the kids' cognitive skills. And I wanted something that was going to be like neutral, third party, no offense to the Brainware folks, but not something that they created, not something that I created. And I wanted to truly look at everything objectively. So we signed up to take this Mindprint assessment that tests like 14 cognitive skills. And in the initial run here on the screen, you can see that working memory, verbal memory, verbal reasoning, they were really low with our kids. Now, when I say that, I mean, we take our entire 6th grade and they take the Mindprint. And then we have that data as those kids are coming to my building. My building is a 7-8 building. So as they come to me, I've now seen, holy cow, these kids are really low on flexible thinking. They're not going to have the same perspective that I want them to have as a student. Holy cow, these kids are really low in whatever the area is. And once we got that initial baseline, then we kind of picked out kids, your normal IEP 504, low gen ed, ESL type kids that we wanted to make them better students. And our strategy was to try to grow their cognitive skills. So we had the baseline and we said, we're going to try this program, this Brainware program. Any aid, In this case, my athletic director could take it. They could basically have a study hall. And for 4 days a week, 40 minutes a day, we did 1 day a week where they did some community service or they had some sort of another initiative. So over the course of basically your typical 90-day semester, the kids got on Brainware and they played these 20 different activities or 20 different games, if you will. You can see on the screen that what the opening screen looks like, and they get to pick if they want to be the monkey or the bear or the snake or the whatever, and they pick their character. And throughout the process of playing the game, as they accomplish the different levels and ultimately are growing their cognitive skills, their character grows and ages and gets bigger and stronger as a result of them passing the levels. So my son picked the cat looking thing right above the exit sign there. And I had my own kid at home as well take this. And they kind of connect to that animal. They start getting into doing the program. They start to enjoy it. And I guess I'm going to talk about a lot here that I'm going to throw at you. But what we wanted to accomplish, which was doing better academically, kids feeling better about themselves as a student and as a person, and gaining like a competitive edge. We feel like as we've worked with this program, we have very concrete data that shows that the kids working on the Brainware Safari program, they absolutely excel. So looking forward to this next screen. One of the first pieces that we got was we started with this semester pilot group, right? And you saw the initial data. And if you remember, the working memory was at 8, and it literally grew 6 times up to a score of a 52 for our group of kids. The verbal memory got 3 times stronger, and the verbal reasoning doubled. And you guys know as well as anybody does as a teacher that those are 3 huge skills when it comes to reading. So I had kids that were reading at a 1st, 2nd, 3rd grade level. I really wanted to get every kid at least to a 4th grade level whenever they leave my middle school and go on to the high school. And so clearly right there on a neutral mind print assessment, we had significant gains. So let's flip forward for a second. So as the principal of the building, I know my superintendent says, man, I really hope we can do something about our iLearn scores. My secretaries talk about the number of kids that are getting Fs. My staff that does and deals with tardies and documenting discipline. My 7th grade team of teachers, my 8th grade team of teachers wishes that, we could kind of stop the negative curve that the pandemic has had on student learning. They wish that they could help our students be better students. So we want them to be more confident in their abilities. We want them to actually follow through and do their work. I mean, you get the idea of what our goals were in wanting to have a competitive edge compared to all the other schools around us. So in doing this Brainware program for the semester, having about 50, 60 kids, whatever it was in the first year that we got through it, we took a look at where we were. And originally we were at 43% of our kids passing the language arts piece of the iLearn. And originally we were 30% passing the math test. And you can see the gains. I think anybody here would pay really good money to gain 10% and to gain 13%. No, the teacher didn't change. Mr. Buss has been teaching language arts now. This is his 18th year in language arts for 7th grade. Miss Lyle has still been teaching math. She's got 5 years in here now total. We did change math textbooks last year, but this is the first year of having that, and we're looking at results from the year before. It wasn't really a curriculum thing. It wasn't a thing where the kids' home lives changed, and there weren't 100 of our students that suddenly won the lottery and became very affluent and could purchase one-on-one tutoring. The community didn't really change. The teacher didn't change. The kids didn't change, except that the kids became stronger, if you will, with their cognitive skills. So flipping forward, the positive results that grabbed the attention of my superintendent, of my 7th grade team of teachers, is displayed there in clear color form how much better the kids did that took the brainware. So we had kids, it's so important to move from red to yellow and to move from yellow to green and from green to blue. The state's all about, having this goal of having students achieve growth. I want kids to have growth. My teachers want the kids to have growth. So we feel like what we had was a 90% success rate, with 30% improving an entire category in both subjects, 20% in one, 20% in another, and 20% achieving their growth percentage goals that the state sets for us. So we're ecstatic with the success that we had, gaining 10% on language arts that year. I still think a lot of credit goes to me. No, I don't think that. I think, it's school climate and culture, right? Like, we just do such a good job of giving away free snacks to everybody. No, I don't think it was that. I think it was the fact that we grew our brains, kind of like I want to grow my biceps. And so the teachers, about 4 or 5 weeks into it, 6 weeks into it, even, just really noticed the kids actually starting to do their work. They noticed some subtle differences. I want you to hear from a teacher what she thinks as she watched these kids. So I'm going to let you play this real quick.
Greg, I can't hear it.
This is something that this generation really students, after starting to use the program, I think they are more able to use information and be able to maneuver with information and come to more abstract thinking conclusions. This is something that this generation really struggles with, I would say, as I've seen this year and last year, is abstract thinking. And I think that this Brainware program shows students how to think more outside of the box and solve problems that are not meant to be solved just one way. And it shows them how to do that.
I'm not sure if everybody heard that the whole way through or not, but I definitely want to allow people to jump in, type in any questions. And then let's go ahead and play what the football coach said, or I don't know if that video is next here. Okay, so I feel like listening to my teachers, they clearly were happy with the progress that the students were making. We get the iLearn results, they've improved. I feel like there's a much more positive self-confidence among our kids because of a survey that we did with them. And then, as we're having some conversations, here's my football coach talking about a kid that, took Brainware for a semester. That's his quarterback.
Our starting quarterback this year, his name is Cameron Hordos. He was originally just a hockey player, but I talked him into football. And what we saw on the Brainware results was his spatial awareness almost doubled or tripled after he took Brainware. And that was so obvious watching him grow as a football player from last year practice to the games. just his ability to read the field and see there's an opening here, there's a receiver down there, or even when he's running behind his lineman, pointing out, you need to block for me here or there, or it was very apparent that his mind was very gifted in spatial awareness and acting on that as well.
As a principal going to a lot of those sporting contests, seeing the quarterback improve, seeing the girl that was always like our go-to server on the volleyball team, seeing a really unique, eclectic group of girls decide to become cheerleaders, and how they communicated and bonded and got better and had the confidence to go and be put themselves out there in a competition cheer situation. I just have seen the kids grow like immensely as a result of, their cognitive skills growing. So we did this self-esteem, the next slide, I believe. We did this self-esteem study where we asked the kids to reflect. Are they a better student? Do they feel better about themselves? We gave them a set of questions that you can see across the bottom. Do you think that, your attention, your focus has improved? Am I, more confident in my ability to be able to learn? All those things you can see across the bottom. And I know that when you do a survey with middle school kids, you never know what you're going to get. But, overwhelmingly 75% or more of those kids were very positive about their results and truly believed that they had made 30% or more gains in what they're trying to do as far as a student goes. We have interviewed students, and they've talked about their ability to make sure that they manage their time and they get things turned in on time, and the actual, skills that go into learning, if you will. There's 43 cognitive skills that brainware through those 20 activities and games has the students try to improve. And from what we've seen, they definitely do improve them. So when I say there's 43 that brainware works on, then the mind print actually just assesses 14 specific, cognitive skills. I've just been extremely happy. I'm not, I don't know if this is necessarily all about brainware and it's all about growth. To me, it's about, how do I help a student be a better student? How do I help, how do I give them the confidence and the skills they need to be a better student? And ultimately, I want them to be a better student. I want them to do better on the iLearn. I want them to compete better. I want them to gain in all the ways that we kind of have on the little bubble chart there. So I have been very, very pleased with the results at this point in time. So then I also want to track what else is going on. Like, are we decreasing or are they staying the same? The number of tardies, the number of discipline referrals that kids are getting when they grow their brain. And I was really overwhelmed to see this. One of the secretaries in the office is responsible for tracking all of our data. So these same kids averaged 6.2 tardies per 9 weeks, it should say at the top, per 9 weeks. I apologize. And they cut that in half. I was really kind of surprised and shocked. It didn't surprise me because I've noticed that things got better, but taking a look at actual data to see how it got better was important to me. And then those same kids that average 3.4 discipline referrals every 9 weeks, it shrunk down to 1.4. So not only did they behave better, get to class on time better, end up testing better on iLearn, the lady that's been out here for the last 20 plus years, the teachers that have been here for 30 and 40 years, they're looking at the 9 weeks grade data. And we are at 1, 2, maybe 3 kids in the 7th grade that has an F. We are at 7 or 8 kids in the 8th grade that has an F. And they're looking at this data each 9 weeks, for the last 2 school years now. And they're just so impressed with how much better the students are doing as far as meeting deadlines, passing their classes, and doing what we want them to do. We are 5 points away from being undefeated in our 7th grade volleyball team this year. I just have seen our track teams have been undefeated the last 3 years. We have girls going to state in cross country, girls going to state in track. We never had any of that stuff, 4 years ago when I came here. And I know there can be a lot of different factors that go into school improvement, having good leadership, trying to have the best teachers you can have, what curriculum you put out there. But in 30 years, I've never seen anything have such an impact as growing their cognitive skills. So I'm sure somebody has questions. How much does it cost? How did you pay for it? So those are usual questions. Brainware has a package pricing deal with every education service center, just like we have package pricing on school milk and garbage pickup. So the price is very affordable. And to pay for it, I just budgeted it out initially out of my my instructional fund, my 611 account. And then after that, we got a digital learning grant and a STEM grant, and we paid for it out of grant money and continue to pay for it out of our 611 money because we see what the benefit is of it.
One of the things that might be helpful to talk about in that respect, Greg, is the fact that students don't need to do this program over and over again every year. It's like you invest in it one time for the student, they build up their cognitive skills, and for most of them, it's a one-time intervention.
It's powerful that in one semester of giving them, we call it Student Success Center. You could call it study hall. You could call it whatever you want. In our special ed population, we have Learning Center, and we have a class called Basic Skills. And we put like 18 of those kids in grade 7 on the program. I had a kid who came to me. He was up for expulsion as a 6th grader. He does not like to read or write. That's still not his favorite thing to do. But he showed the growth piece on his language arts iLearn test that we just got graded, and he actually passed his math iLearn test. I can just think of a number of success stories, whether it's an ESL kid, 504 kid, whatever. There's something that playing those 20 activities, playing those 20 games, it grows their brain, grows those cognitive skills, like what Betsy has explained. It's powerful. I do have our 8th grade iLearn results almost completely finished. There's like 4 kids, I think, that still need to be graded. And just looking at, it blows my brains out. It's not public knowledge, but we gained 16% in the language arts from last year's 8th grade to this year's 8th grade results. And in math, we gained 14%. Now there's still, like I said, 4 kids to be graded, but I just have never seen anything that you give to a kid to do. I mean, I've had him do bicep curls. I'd have him physically get stronger in the weight room. I've done a lot of different programs as a high school principal and tried a lot of different things, but it's just been amazing to see the growth that we've been able to achieve with this particular group of kids. And Betsy's right. For the most part, they just use the program for that one semester. But my experience with Brainware is that the Jimmies and the Joes that I put on there, they get to still have access to it the following semester. They still continue to have access to Brainware in 8th grade or into 9th grade. We got like 10 kids that have completed all 168 levels of the program. So they enjoy it. They have access to it until they've completed all the levels. And it's just been very powerful for us to help our kids be better students.
So once again, please type any questions into the chat. Let's give everybody a little chance to pop those questions in there. We know the chat's working, so that's, hopefully we'll see if there's some other thoughts or questions. Okay, 150 to 165 students per grade. I don't know if that's, Craig, if you were starting out with the program again, is there anything you would have done differently?
So,
Implementing-
yeah, I think that's a really good question. I started out on day one going in and walking across in front of the room, in front of the whiteboard, talking about how when I walk on the beach, even though I'm 50 something, I want to look good, right? You guys know what I mean? I want to look good. I want to get a tan. So I talked to them about how, Mr. Goert's kind of weak, right? He don't have much for biceps. But if I go and I start working out in a couple months, I can get stronger. And I explained to them, like what I did to you, that this is your brain gets stronger just by playing video games. Your brain you become a better reader by reading and reading and reading. And I tell them the story that in 7th grade, I was like the 15th man in basketball, and I couldn't dribble with my left hand. And I ask them, so what do you guys think I did to become a starter then in 8th grade? Well, duh, you practice dribbling with your left hand. And I say, well, yeah, duh, exactly. That's what I did, right? And so how do you become a better student? I'm tasked as the principal to help you become a better student. And they would throw out some things, like I said, like, read more, do my homework, come to school every day. And so we had some dialogue. So I kicked it off that way. And then I kind of popped in every 2 weeks to just kind of, I don't know, and say something to encourage them. I'm always around. It's a small enough building with those kinds of numbers to know what's going on. And I looked for kids, the first kid to get to 50, got him a candy bar. Kid gets to 75, kids gets to 100. Dairy Queen's a big deal here. So I tried to do all of those things to make sure that there would be buy-in from the start. I don't honestly know that there's anything I would do different except spend more money and have more kids on the program. I don't feel like, I don't know. I guess I would have probably tried to get special ed to be more on board with it and get more special ed kids on the program as well, which is now next year would be our 3rd year working on brainware. That's kind of become the ultimatum when you look at our results. We still have to take our results this year and look at how the brainware kids did. So we use the typical ClearSight program for my first 2 years. I like ClearSight because it's by Cambium, and it looks like the test, right? Because it's created by them. And then my boss said, we're going to switch everybody to iReady. So this year we're on iReady. We use iExcel. We use Alex in math. We use Prodigy. We've done the normal trials with Get More Math and also with Musology. I thought that was really cool because everything's set to music and it's math concepts, and you get a free trial for 30 days, even though I told them it really should be 60 because it's an awesome program. It would be nice to have it for like a whole 9 weeks. So those are things that we've done. I would say, aside from having something to just assess the kids, which is all we use iReady for. Trust me, kids at John Glenn are sick and tired of iReady by the time they get to 7th grade. They don't want to do those activities anymore. They're burnt out on it. So I don't do them there. I let them do iExcel and different things.
It's another question that was in the Q&A about Brainware Safari, which is the cognitive training program asking whether the games are adaptive to each style, and do they have to take a placement test? And I can respond to that. So there's no placement test that's required. We like using Mindprint because it's a good benchmark and can give us a real good read on cognitive growth, as well as providing that information on individual learning, but it does not require you to do that. And so there's no everybody. It's like a video game. Everybody comes in. It's just as a little bit of background. It comes from clinical therapy, so it's not random games. It is decades of clinical therapy that has been translated into a video game format. And so everybody starts at level 1, just like in a typical video game. There are multiple exercises or activities. The kids call them games. We try not to change their minds about that, but that they're really truly therapeutic techniques or procedures, if you will. They just look more fun.
So there's rhythm tapping things. There's tic-tac-toe. There's being able to see objects, which one is rotated accordingly. So there's all the spatial. It's cool. I guarantee you, somewhere around 45 to 50, the kids are going to be like, this sucks. You're not supposed to say sucks, but this sucks. This is hard. Man, Mr. Gore, this is hard. Can I like stop doing this? And you're going to have some reinforcement. Some of the games are going to hit a total wall on because their brain is just really weak in that particular category. So you're going to have somebody who is administering the brainware that has good relationship skills, good encouragement and help type skills. Kids cannot have a piece of paper. They can't take notes while they're doing it. That's cheating. They got to do it all in their head. My son has a bad habit of always, he doesn't have it anymore. He's grown out of his inhibitory control issue. As a result, I think of doing 136, 138 levels of brainware. So you see different growth with different kids that you put on the program. And I've even experimented with some like really good academic students, throwing them on there, because when we met with Betsy and we looked at the Mindprint assessment, there were some kids who are like really good students, but they're really weak in certain cognitive skills on that Mindprint. And so then I've had to call the parents and say, I hear you. You don't want your kid to have Student Success Center. What's this brainware program? Why does my kid need this? I want him in whatever, STEM, coding, woodshop, whatever elective we offer. So it was just a matter of having a conversation and explaining to them what we were doing, and that it was only one semester, and everybody trusted us and bought in. Is everybody on this like from Indiana?
Yes.
Yeah.
As far as I know, yeah, this was specifically for people in Indiana. And
Yeah, so I mean, I've been a principal for 22 years. I taught for 8 years. So I'm finishing my 30th year. I don't get paid by Brainware, although I've been to a couple of dinners. So being completely transparent, they picked up the bill when I ate. And my superintendent's been to 3 or 4 dinners as well. I don't have any Brainware apparel. I don't drive a Brainware car. At this point in time, I haven't accepted any cash or anything else. I am as average of a dude as comes as a principal goes. And I grew up in a small town like this. I've worked in inner city Fort Wayne, inner city Indianapolis, suburbs of like Columbia City and other places. This program works. It works. It's worth the money that you spend on it. It's easy to write a grant and build in some money there. I called one of the neighboring principals over here at Argus, good guy. I had his kid here in school and asked him to be in our golf outing fundraiser we got coming up. And the next day he emailed me and he said, "Hey, do you do Brainware?" And I said, "Yes." And I sent him our data If that doesn't sell it, I don't know what does. Another neighboring principal here, she was like, Greg, I had 0 people in 8th grade pass language arts or math. And I said, are you kidding me? You had 0 kids in the 8th grade. And I looked it up and she was telling the truth. 0 kids passed. I said, you should try brainware. Might have to hire a new teacher too, by the way. But I mean, you got some real problems going on when you have 0 people passing. Guys, this is our 2nd year with these 8th graders. They gained the cognitive skills in a semester and they've held on to it. We had 32 kids in 8th grade math test that were blue, pass plus. 32 kids. Almost makes me want to cry. I'm so happy about that. Like 30 kids passed at the green level. There's still 4 more. I'm hoping somebody else passes. But the results that we've seen with these kids by giving them this support to grow their cognitive skills is crazy good.
Greg, you also mentioned about, what's important in the coach, the teacher, or it doesn't have to be a teacher working with the students, because it's not the teacher. The role of the teacher or the role of the coach is not to instruct. They don't need to know about developing cognitive skills. They just really need to be a good coach. And
just need to have a good person. All they really have to do, they could be old like me and learn to click in and see how many levels, and learn to click in and see that the kid has actually worked on it 4 days out of the 5, or at least 3 out of the 5. They don't have to be super good with technology. And like you said, they're not coaching the kids to complete the exercises. Trust me, I tried. When some of the kids hit a wall, I sat down next to them. I didn't know the solutions to some of the things they were doing, so I couldn't have even helped if I wanted to. And you just got to be helpful and encouraging and have a positive attitude, be a good person, and let the kids struggle through it. So we have each kid work about 3 activities a day for like 14 or 15 minutes. Kind of call times, time to switch games. So that's what we do.
Okay, great. Any other questions? I don't, looks like we've answered, I think, all of them. If we haven't, we will certainly get back to you. And want to give Greg a huge thank you for joining us today and sharing your experience and insights. There's nothing like hearing it straight from where the kids are working.
I put my email in the chat earlier, so if anybody wanted to reach out, or you can just Google John Glenn Schools or Uri Middle School, I'm sure you can find me. And it's not complicated, and it's a great way to improve your students' ability to be a good student. So
thanks very much. So what we want to do for the last little bit here is sort of design this as a Mindprint workshop. And by the way, I do want to say we didn't have everybody take us up on our offer to have a student or yourself take the Mindprint assessment. It's quite insightful. I know that the teachers who have done this with their own students and administrators have really gotten a lot from doing that. But the offer is still there. It's still on the table. If you would like to, as background, the Mindprint assessment is online, so you don't have to schedule it, or you do it whenever it's convenient for you and your child. You can use it with your own child. You can use it with a student. You can take it yourself. And it takes about an hour. So that's the time investment. And then you will see the kinds of reports, and we will be happy to walk you through that. If you'd like to schedule a demo of Brainware Safari so that you can actually see the program that the kids are working in, that's usually the best first step, because we can take you through and give you a quick overview of what it looks like and how it works. So, and I know Trish or I would be happy to arrange that for you. So what we wanted to do, though, was to take advantage. We did have one of the people who registered for today. I don't know if she is actually on the webinar today. Hopefully she is, but I'm not going to use her name because we will have a schedule a separate time with her to go over her results in even more detail. But so I have two students I want to show you mind print. One is a random student, and the other one is someone who's on the call today. So this is sort of what this report looks like. You saw these earlier. This student is Alex, and Alex is a boy. So this is not the person who's on the call today. And just want you to, think about what this looks like as a learner in your classroom and how you can support them. So once again, visual memory is a strength, but verbal memory is weak. So when we know that, we looked at students who had that big difference before. Good attention skills, so they can stay focused, good processing speed, abstract reasoning and spatial perception. So abstract reasoning is reasoning with seeing patterns, forming concepts, being able to just understand logic, cause and effect, all those kinds of things. Spatial perception is physically where things are in space. I call this the parallel parking skill for adults. So you might think of it that way, or the Lego building skill. And so reasons really well with nonverbal information, but look over here in skills to support. Verbal reasoning is a real weakness. And so that's going to be something that stands in the way of, and this can look like, and also working memory, which is a weakness. So it would be very common for a teacher of a student like this to say, well, they just don't pay attention, or they're really smart, but they just don't care. They just, when you ask them to read, they hate reading. Well, they probably hate reading because it's very difficult for them to draw inferences, to do the kinds of things they want them to do, to use figurative language, to extract meaning from a lot of, words on the page. And so it can look like a lot of things that it's really not. And it's when we are able to get, scientific data basically on how they learn that we really start to appreciate what they struggle with, what they're good at, help help them use their strengths to really get better at learning and to be more successful in academics and everything else, as you heard Greg describe. So the other one is named Alice. And this is the one who may or may not be with us today, but Alice has a very different kind of cognitive profile, would be a very different kind of student. And we don't know if she'll recognize herself here, but we'll see. Really strong in those nonverbal reasoning skills, abstract reasoning. And you see this little star by spatial perception. That means that this person is scored in the top 5%. So she is gifted in spatial perception. Whether school is letting her show that giftedness is another story altogether, because we tend to prioritize in school verbal reasoning, abstract reasoning, especially in a more advanced math and science and things like that, but may not be getting an opportunity to show what it is that she can do. If you ask her, and she's got solid verbal reasoning, but what you see when you see this kind of difference, even though she's got good verbal reasoning, she's got way much stronger visual spatial reasoning and abstract reasoning. And one of the things that can be the case is that learning experiences can be very frustrating for even a student who has a lot of good, solid cognitive skills like this when they are different. So this kind of reasoning is so easy for her And comparatively speaking, verbal reasoning is much more challenging. Those differences in cognitive strengths tend to produce anxiety. So if you think about you're in a learning situation and you don't know what your strength is, you don't know why certain kinds of activities are so much easier for you than others. And so every learning experience is unpredictable, and you don't know exactly what it's going to be like because you don't know what's really being required of you and how your brain is going to handle it. When you do this, you start to take a lot of the emotion out of things. You let students understand how their strengths work and how to use them, how this student can use her very strong visual spatial skills, doing things like mind mapping, doing things like building models, all that kinds of hands-on kind of thing is going to be a very effective way for her to understand things. And then helping her develop her verbal reasoning by describing it and talking about it. Now, I've been avoiding it, but we're going to drop down here onto the bottom right in the purple section to skills to support. And again, this little box has a meaning. It means that she scored in the bottom 5% of the population for flexible thinking. And what that means is that if you think about the student who I said is, maybe a little bit anxious because some things she reasons in different ways, but she's got good memory skills as well. So she's going to be able to remember and commit information to memory. And when she has to, come back up with what the capitals of the states are and all those kinds of things, she's probably going to do just fine. But if something happens that's not anticipated, that's going to throw her for a little bit of a loop, because flexible thinking is that ability to shift gears and to approach things from a different. So just for a student who's got really strong reasoning skills, she is more likely to confound you when she's having difficulty because she has difficulty shifting gears. If her first approach doesn't work, she's going to have difficulty backing up, regrouping, thinking of different approaches, and may need some coaching on that. And so now we've learned a whole bunch about this student. And usually when I have these kinds of conversations, whether it's talking with a parent, which we do a lot, whether it's talking with the child themselves, which we do sometimes with appropriate ages, or talking with parents and teachers, oh my gosh, now I finally understand why XYZ, why this particular thing is so difficult for my child or my student, and really starts to help clarify not just what we can do, but then how we can support them. And as Greg has talked about, this student, is fairly strong across the board, but flexible thinking is certainly a challenge. This student is really going to have stumbling blocks from their weaker verbal memory and working memory. And when we can strengthen those skills, they're just there for the kids to do what they do. They don't have to think about it as much. The skills are just there. Everything becomes easier. Things become less fraught. Things become less anxiety producing. You see kids having more confidence in their learning ability. You see kids having more willingness to take on difficult tasks, a better attitude in general, just, all the kinds of things that we know make for more capable and more mature students. So if we had more of you who had taken a mind print, we could look at your mind prints and tell you what we see in your learning strengths and weaknesses, and would be delighted, as I said before, to give you an opportunity to do that. So just email me. I'm going to share share the screen with all of our contact information on it. And as we again encourage you to type questions into the chat window. ask you to, share your questions, and feel free to contact any of us. I'll be delighted to help or answer questions.
Yeah, Betsy, one of the things I want to let everybody know is that there are several different ways, different strategies that schools are using around the state. And it's not a one size fits all at all. And so I'd be happy to share some of those ideas, and of course, implementation and pricing and that sort of thing. I'm very happy to talk to folks about that.
Yeah, well, that's a great point, Trish. There are probably as many different successful implementations as there are schools. I mean, they're just, the things that tend to guide the thought process are, first of all, the students that you are particularly focused on. Sometimes it's a small group, sometimes it's a broad group, sometimes it's a group for whom you've tried a whole bunch of different things and nothing has worked. Most of those things you've tried have probably been what I call outside in. They're changing teaching, they're changing supports, they're changing technology, they're changing curriculum, they're changing things outside of the student. And what we know we can do is to change learning from the inside out, so that students experience learning in a different way and are more capable and therefore more confident. So there are a lot of ways to do that. And sometimes we've seen more students qualify for gifted programs. We've seen students in special ed dramatically improve their cognitive skills and perform much more from a cognitive point of view, much more like their more typically developing peers. And I don't have that in this deck, but if you're interested in looking at the way that students with specific learning disabilities can actually have those learning disabilities substantially remediated, there is research that has been done on that. So really across the spectrum. So focusing on a group that you can implement with fidelity is the key always. It can be for everybody. It's certainly something that that benefits everybody across the spectrum of capability. But the key is to get, and the recommended protocol is 3 to 5 times a week for 30 to 45 minutes over at least 12 weeks. And so that's very doable within a semester as an intervention. With a group that takes the assessment, if you want to do that at the beginning, spends the time in Brainware. It can be used on computers, so PCs, Macs, and most Chromebooks. Those are the main considerations. Usually it's the schedule, it's the group of students, and it's where the computers happen to be. That are sort of the initial guiding force. You want to add anything to that, Trish?
Just one more thing, and that is our website. Whether you come along and get with us at Brainware or whatever kinds of things you're going to be doing with your students, I encourage everyone to at least browse through our website in the resources tab, because we have all kinds of third-party research. We have white papers. We have testimonials from parents who have their kids have gone through this. And so I would encourage you just to, go through that website and see if there might be something on there that can help you already, even before, we have a conversation about engaging.
I think we're probably running up against, we got a few more minutes of our time left. So we'll give everybody another minute or so to type in any additional questions you may have. Anything you wanted to add, Greg, as you've had a chance to reflect now on?
I just stepped over and I was talking to my athletic director, who has had that Student Success Center now for 2 years. And, it's easy. It's easy to do. It's going to help your kids grow neurons, muscles, whatever, their brain to be better students. It's just, it works. It's one of the best things we've ever tried. I mean, you know, we bought $475 worth of Oreos. Yeah, I said that out loud. Oreos and Chips Ahoy. And we had all these like cookies and snacks set out. So if you worked hard on your iLearn and you tried your best, your name went into drawing for different prizes. So, you know, we had a true hodgepodge of just stuff that middle school kids would enjoy. Sat out in the library, and then for each day of the testing, if they took their Chromebook to the testing, I know, novel idea, but they did. If they took their Chromebook to the testing, if they had their charging cord, if the Chromebook was charged up, if they made it to school on time, and then you can go down through the imaginary list of how they won tickets. So then they were given their tickets, and then they went around to each prize and they put their tickets into the things that they wanted to win. So the football helmets that we can't reuse anymore, slap a couple stickers on it, make it look cool. It's broken in, and you could win a football helmet. I bought these baseball hats because they got the big Yuri U on, and we thought like this would be cool. We're going to start a baseball team, and then that got nixed. And that's fine. I got all the hats, so we'll start giving away some of those. You got to be principal for the day. Nope, I don't think anybody picked that one. You got a homework pass. You know, we had these different things that really didn't cost a lot of money. And for $475, basically 102 kids out of 312, like all got a prize. If they, you know, put their tickets in a basket, and if they earned tickets. There were some kids that didn't try very hard. They hardly won any tickets. They didn't have much of a chance of winning. So I'm all about incentives. I'm all about school climate. I'm fist bumping you right now for listening to this and giving it a try. But the reality is, in 30 years, like this is the one thing that really helps you grow your brain muscles and become better with your verbal memory, your visual memory, all these skills. Like straight up, it works. That's my thing.
Thank you again. Thank you very much, Greg, for joining us today. I know you've got a building full of students who need your attention and are competing for it in good and not so good ways in many cases, but really do appreciate that. And Trish, thank you as well. And always nice to see your smiling face. And I want to thank everybody who's joined us today. I hope you found this helpful and interesting and learned something. And if you did, then we know your brains have changed and are structurally a little different than they were when you came here. And that's what's the objective. So
there you go. You know, I'm glad you're recording this so I can share with my superintendent that you do understand that I get pulled away like that a few times, and I apologize. Here's the thing for other principals out there, like everybody's always so scared to try something new, right? What if it works the first year and it flops the second year? I'm out that money. Can't get that money back. I don't have much money to spend on. Man, I have heard people make excuses for the last 30 years. Most of them have been parents, not educators. But like, it's time that we do something different. It's time that we actually understand the brain a little bit more and actually do something to grow our kids. I mean, I'm still growing my teachers, but my teachers are dog tired right now. They're tired. We're not doing any PD this summer. Heck, the kids are tired. So try something new. I highly recommend this. Have a great day.
Yes, we hope you all have a great day. We hope to hear from you. Be happy to follow up. And is one more thing in the chat window. Oh, it's a thank you. So we appreciate that very, very much. Thanks, everybody. And we will hopefully see and talk to you soon. Take care.